With Liquor Barn, you can shop your favorite bourbon, that perfect bottle of wine, or discover something new. To place an order for pickup or delivery, download the Liquor Barn app, visit liquorbarn.com, or call your nearest Liquor Barn location. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our email list for all the latest news on products, promotions, and events. Liquor Barn, where Kentuckians go to celebrate life. Cheers!
From January through March, in honor of MLK Jr. Day, Black History Month, and Women's History Month, Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey is teaming up with our account partners and our Uncle Nearest Whiskey family to raise up to $1 million for historically black colleges and universities through the sale of old-fashioned cocktails and Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey products. Visit oldfashionedcocktail.com to learn more and to join the Uncle Nearest HBCU Old Fashioned Challenge today.
Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, not in the Bourbon Life studios today, it's my special co-host, Stacey. Stacey, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Mark. Doing great, despite your yellow lighting. I think we're going to be just fine today.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to take a quick second to explain what's going on. Of course, the bad storms, rolled through central Kentucky on Friday. The wind was absolutely insane. I've never seen it that bad before. Ever. The damage is crazy around here. So we are fortunate to have electricity at our house, but we have no internet. So we're on day 4 now. I was hoping to get it fixed. So I ended up coming down to a friend's studio here in Lexington. And unfortunately, I picked the one spot in the studio that has just an overhead orange yellow light. So I do look really creepy. I'm glad we're not recording video.
Thank goodness this isn't YouTube.
Oh, I know. No kidding. And the weird thing is, the last time we had the Master Distiller from this particular distillery was in July of last year, and a huge thunderstorm had just rolled through Woodford County and was rolling in through Lexington as we were recording. So we thought we might lose power during that show. So there's something about having people from this particular distillery on the show that, brings in bad weather around or before. So we're gonna have to figure something out with that. Anyway, I want to thank our guests. We appreciate our host. Jeez, I can't even talk.
Yeah, thank
I'm so
your
out
host.
Of my element. I know. I'm gonna thank my host Stacey for being here. Yeah, Matt's not here today, so I'm happy to have Stacey with me. But I do want to thank all of our sponsors. We appreciate everything they do for us. And with that said, Stacey, would you like to tell everybody who we have with us today?
I absolutely would. We would like to thank her for being here as well while we're on that topic of giving thanks. We have with us today Miss Elizabeth O'Neill McCall, who is the new Master Distiller for Woodford Reserve. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're thrilled. I was so excited to see that news a couple of weeks ago, and I was just, I emailed Chris, and I'm like, Chris, we got to get her on the show. Can we do that? Can we work it out? So I'm so happy that your schedule was flexible enough that we were able to get you on the show. And, even with the yellow lighting and everything else, I'm glad you you decided to stick around.
The yellow lighting is definitely a little bit of a problem. I'm kidding.
Oh my gosh.
I wouldn't even think about it. I would just, but yeah.
I'm putting it out of my head. I'm not going to look at the screen anymore. I'm just going to, like I said, I'm thankful.
He's used to having that home studio lighting. He's a little spoiled.
Oh, I am. I admit it. Well, Elizabeth, we're so happy to have you on the show. We really appreciate it. It's our first time to have you on. We've had Chris on before. We had him on episode 49 and episode 125. So I always like to encourage our listeners to go back, if they didn't check those episodes out, to go back. The first show, we really dove into a lot of the history of Woodford Reserve, which was a lot of fun to talk to Chris about that. And then the last episode, we did a whole tasting through 3 of the different expressions in the distillery series, which was a lot of fun as well. So, but I'm really looking forward to hitting in some of these expressions with you and just talking about everything that's going on. But before we start, would you like to tell everybody what we've got poured up on this first round?
Yes. So I thought it was a good interesting selection, different than our normal. So we're going to start with double oaked, which is a personal favorite of mine. And then we have our Woodford Reserve Kentucky Straight Rye Whiskey, which I love the rye whiskey. I have to say it's like a great sipping rye whiskey. And then we have, for a really big treat, we have the Woodford Reserve Baccarat. So that's one that doesn't get a lot of love. So I'm excited we get to talk about it.
Yeah. And when Chris, he had emailed me back and said, yeah, we'll send you some of the Baccarat. I'm like, yeah, just send me the whole bottle. I was like,
I don't even have a bottle. Look,
yeah.
you all can see. This is I was like, I took it. I mean, it's my little sample that when we were filling bottles, like I was like, and I will take a little bit of this liquid.
Yeah.
And I don't have one of the crystal decanters, but
yeah, that's really nice. Well, I'm looking forward to jumping because I've never tasted it before.
Me either.
Stacey and I, we've been kind of nosing it. We poured a little bit just to nose it before we started this. But all right, so this first round, we got the Woodford Reserve, the double oak poured up. So would you want to take a few minutes and just kind of tell everybody a little bit about what the double oak actually is? Now, ours is Jackson Wine and Spirits because that was the bottle I happened to have. It was their pick, so that was the double oak that I had at home. So Stacey and I are actually drinking the Jackson's Wine and Spirits pick. That's
nice. I wonder which one they went with. Because I have some, like, I mean, I love all my children, but there's one of those when we put those personal selection batches together, I always lean towards one of the profiles that we put together that's usually bigger and coffee and oak and all the goodness. But they're all delicious. And I'll talk about like what that is. What does that mean when you do a pick? So first of all, we'll start with what is Woodford Reserve Double Oaked. And Woodford Reserve Double Oaked, it's near and dear to my heart for more than the fact that it's one of our beautiful expressions of Woodford, but it is the first bourbon that I drank just on the rocks, like not dressed up, nothing else. Like it was, and it really and truly is a bourbon that if you are wanting to, I know, like get brave and just not have it in a cocktail and you're like, I'm ready to experience bourbon on the rocks or neat, it's a great one for that because it starts out as regular Woodford Reserve Distiller Select bourbon. So our typical bourbon that I'm sure all of your listeners know and love and are very familiar with, but our standard bourbon is just aged that 5 to 7 sweet spot kind of aging. And but then we take that whiskey. So instead of putting it in a bottle to be bottled as Woodford Reserve Distiller Select bourbon, we take it and we will actually cut it down to 97 proof. And then we take it and we put it into a second barrel. And the second barrel is a heavily toasted and lightly charred barrel. So it is I like to say we do couture barreling at Woodford Reserve because we have our own barrel cooperage. We're able to make barrels to our specific specifications and needs. And we want something a barrel that's going to really bring out the sweet aromatics. So the way that we do that is we heavily toast. So we do a 40-minute toast, which is a crazy long toasting time. And toasting is basically just sending barrels through a giant toaster oven. So we have the heat probes and we run them through there, let them sit for 40 minutes. And the toasting is what draws out all that sweetness from the wood to the surface. And then we run it through the char tunnel. So by toasting, you get into the lignin layer of the wood, which is where vanillin lives. So all those sweet butterscotch notes, pulling that to the front of top of the wood. And then we run it through the toasting tunnel or the char tunnel. We char for that 5 to 10 second flash char. So it's still a new charred oak barrel. We enter our whiskey at 97 proof into that second barrel. And we sit for up to a year. So our spec is 6 to 12 months, but we try to get, good average of that to really give you this beautiful, sweet aromatic forward bourbon. And so it's that second barrel that really gives you that crazy shift in color. So it's so much darker than our standard. And it's still presented at 90.4 proof. But we've now shifted a very balanced and complex bourbon to one that is completely out of balance and is now focused on sweet aromatics. And that's why I think it's such a great bourbon for stepping your toe into, like, I'm going to do this neat or on the rocks and just try it. And I mean, it's so good for that because it has such an inviting nose. I say it's the most friendly hello you'll get from a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. But if you're a Ted Lasso fan, we've been told, I've heard it's been quoted as the Ted Lasso of Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. So,
Hey, I believe.
it's just so friendly, right?
Oh yeah, no doubt. Well, Stacey, talking about the nose, what do you pick up on the nose on this one?
So it's interesting because it's kind of developed as it's sat out a little bit. But when we first poured this up, Mark, I got a lot of like dark cherry, some baking spice, and like a creamy, like custard filling almost from it. But as it opened up a little bit, getting more of those like coffee undertones there, and a hint of like apricot just hiding in there. Not anything super pungent, but it's in there.
Yeah, to me, it's just, this is always just like, even this is a barrel pick, so obviously it's going to be a little, I guess, maybe potentially off profile from what the standard release double oaked would be, but it's still always that nice, that charred sugar, that brown sugar, creme brulee, sweetness, vanilla. It always comes through. That you said cherries, and now I've got it in my head that I'm smelling cherries, Stacey, which I absolutely love.
Power suggestion.
There you go. See, I'm just so impressed because you started writing down all your tasting notes, and I'm just so impressed with that. So now it's like I've got to take you, like, you're the replacement for Matt. Sorry, Matt.
No, I'm not.
Here. Yeah.
Matt and I had this discussion last week, though. I have to write things down or I get lost in the sauce, so to speak.
Yep.
I get overwhelmed and I forget what I've smelled or tasted. So
that makes sense. Well, so Elizabeth, what do we miss on this one? What else is there?
What is interesting is you point out that you do have a pick, like a special small batch pick of our Woodford Reserve double oaked. And basically when you're out at liquor stores and you see, or a on-premise account, and you see that people have their own private label of a Woodford double oaked, it means that they have selected a batch that is probably roughly 60 barrels in size. And all the barrels in that batch share similar flavor qualities that are going to shift it in a certain direction. So I'm, based on how you all are describing it, I'm thinking that this is our profile C, or the 3 batch. So this is one that's kind of geared towards those dried dark fruit notes. Lots of the kind of the oak character and those roasted coffee notes are coming through. And that's one of my personal, I love that. I love that when we put those batches together, because it's just really shows you a different side of double oaked, and it's a little bit a bolder side. Whereas our standard double oaked has that creamy butterscotch nose and vanilla caramel. That's like the signature of it. But then as you kind of dive into it a little bit, you get the dried dark fruit comes through, those baking spice notes, and some of that little hint of grain, the candy pecan.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, it's very nice, and it is. It's a nice gateway bourbon, as you said.
It is a very good gateway bourbon. It's like good for people who are bourbon connoisseurs too. So it's just kind of a cool.
Yeah,
it's an all-encompassing bourbon. I love this one.
It is.
Yeah, I agree with that. So let's jump in and talk about you, because there's a lot to talk about. So if you would, can you just share with our listeners about your background, where you're from originally, and how you started out, and then how you got into the whiskey industry?
Yeah. So I'm originally from Cincinnati, so I don't have the twang that a lot of people look for. And I've done things and people are like, "Oh, you don't have much of that Kentucky twang." I'm like, "I'm so sorry. I don't." Very Midwest boring accent. But yeah, so born in Cincinnati, moved down here when I was in elementary school. And so I do claim a lot of Kentucky. It's kind of where I had a lot of my formative years here, and swear all my family's here now, and my husband is born and bred Kentuckian. So it's just, I love Kentucky. I love the state. And I went to school. So originally on my college journey, I thought, okay, I'm going to major in psychology. And then I thought, when I got done with school, I was like, all right, what do I do? So I'll go back for more school because I don't know what I want to do. And I thought I would be a therapist. And so I got my graduate degree in counseling psychology, and I was going to be a therapist. And then you get into doing therapy, and I realized maybe not what I thought it was going to be. And just, it's a really challenging field. I mean, it's like, I don't want to knock it. It's a great necessary field to work in, but kind of the fates intervened and I found out about a job at Brown Forman. So I was going to work in therapy. And then I realized that there was this job opening up in beverage alcohol at beautiful Brown Forman. And it was in the sensory lab. And I would be doing, setting up taste panels and entering data and being able to leverage my psychology degree, because you're using in sensory, it's all about human response. So you're using your, how a human responds to things, using a human being as your instrument, in order to analyze products. And so I thought that sounded really cool and like a lot more fun than the path I was on. So I sent in my resume right away, got the job. It was an entry-level position as a technician. And I washed a lot of dishes in the lab and really good at organizing samples. But I was in quality control, and quality control is so important. I mean, when you think about any product, quality is what draws consumers in. It makes consumers either stay committed to your brand or go away. And so being in quality control, you wanted to understand, well, if a defect or an issue pops up in any of our products. And I didn't just focus on bourbon. I was focused on everything from tequila to formulated products to our whiskeys, Canadian, Jack Daniels. I mean, everything. Vodka. I was working on all of it. And so you have to understand how those products are made in order to understand where a quality issue comes up and what all those could be. So it was really fun. I was just intrigued by, like, well, where, if you get acetaldehyde in your whiskey, like, where does that come from and why does it occur? And so wanting to understand that process. And that's what kind of got me into the production facilities. And before I knew it, I was traveling around the world. I started in 2009 with the company. And then by 2012, 13, I was traveling all over the world, kind of training our production facilities on how to properly nose and taste our products and what defects to look out for and what methods to use. And so it was just, and that's where I kind of became the first brand ambassador, because a lot of people who are just, you think of like corporate headquarters, right? And it's like, we're like big brothering them. And it was like, no, we're here to help you and to support all of our production facilities. And so that was sort of the first brand ambassador role I had. And then it also kind of got me into that technical side of things that I needed and really learned that I love so much.
So
that's
you turned
really cool.
you turned into a whiskey therapist.
Yes. Well, and you talk to any bartender or, like the people are consuming whiskey and different things when they're up, when they're down, and it's a way to kind of just make you feel good. So it's a form of therapy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now, did I read somewhere that was your mom in the whiskey industry at one point? Was that right?
Yeah. So my mom, she was in quality control for packaging at Seagram's in Lawrenceburg, Indiana.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, what everybody now knew as MGP, I guess now is Ross and Squibb, right? So.
Yeah. Is that what it is now?
Yeah.
I think that, they've changed the name with the Luxco merger and everything. I think they're now going by Ross and Squibb.
And Squibb.
Yeah, my wife says it sounds like a CPA firm.
It does. That's what I was like. Okay.
Oh yeah. Well, Stacey, let's talk about the palate and the finish on this double oak. What are you picking up on this one? Since you're taking those awesome notes now.
Listen, Mark, cut it out with the notes.
I'm serious. I'm impressed that you're doing that, because I never do that. So I love it. I'm going to start seeing you and Matt do that. I'm going to have to start doing that. So anyway, what do you pick up on it?
So get a little bit of the tobacco and some dark fruit still, but it's coming more across as a raisin instead of a dark cherry for me now. Across the palate anyway. Getting some of those nice vanilla, like brown sugar notes as well on the palate. And it's got a medium finish where it kind of like hangs out in the mid palate. And I really like that.
Yeah, I still get that sweetness. I get, because the mash bill, if I remember correctly, I think it was like 72, 18, 10. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yes. So you do get that high. I mean, even though it's been finished in that secondary barrel, which brings out a lot of that sweetness. I mean, you still got 18% rye, which is a pretty
Right.
decently high rye mash bill. So that spice still comes through to me a little bit, but it's it's coated in that sweetness, that brown sugar still, that sweetness. Stacey, I agree. The dried fruit, like you said, raisin maybe comes through, but just overall, this is one of my favorite bourbons, and this is
me too.
one of the bourbons that I always tell people that if, especially dessert bourbon for me. But like you said, Elizabeth, if anybody's just trying to get into bourbon and they just want to jump in, this is a great place to start. 90.4 proof, easy drinker, and just really, really unique. So what else on the palate and the finish there, Elizabeth, since you're the expert?
I think that you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I love how it seems like it's going to be super sweet. I mean, we talk about it being sweet, aromatic, forward, but there's so much spice still in that. And then the dried dark fruit is really, I love the raisin. I mean, raisin's such a great call out for palate, for bourbon, especially this one, it has that. And then one thing that it always double oaked, a standard, you taste it and you let it sit on your palate. One thing that always stands out, and it reminds me of chocolate chip cookie dough, when you are eating the wet ingredients, the brown sugar, vanilla, butter, and regular sugar, and you take it and you just let it sit. Because now, I mean, that's like all I get on my palate. Like, it's just like I've had that in my mouth. Like, so then I have made chocolate chip cookies substituting vanilla with double oaked.
Oh.
They're so good. And it doesn't take up a lot because people are like, I don't want to use my bourbon for that. But honestly, a little bit goes a long way. And so it really changes. Those are some really good cookies.
It makes some killer cookies. I can attest to that for sure.
Have you done it? You've done it, Stacey?
I have. It's so good. I'll bring that to the next crew night.
I was going to say, where have these cookies been?
That was before I knew you guys.
They're so good.
They really
it's
are.
A great recipe. So that's the thing about it. And it just kind of hangs out with you. I mean, it just sits. Oh, so good.
I agree.
I like that it still has a lot of that like rye characteristics, like Mark was talking about, that nice like peppery finish to it, but it's not anything that's super overwhelming for those that aren't super into, that heavy baking spice or those rye characteristics that a lot of people get on the palate. It's very approachable.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Well, I'll tell you what, we are actually at the end of round one here. So why don't we take a quick break? I know that was really fast, like crazy fast, how quickly we got through that. So let's take a quick break, but we got a lot more to unpack with Elizabeth. So everybody just sit tight, and we're going to get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more with Elizabeth McCall, the new Master Distiller at Woodford Reserve, in just a minute. From our good friends at The Stave comes Lexington's newest hot spot to meet up with friends, have fun, and eat some great food. District 7 Social is a social and beer hall, but it's a lot more than that. Located in Lexington's Distillery District, it's the home of Lexington's first duck pin bowling lanes, and it also features a self-serve beer wall. That's right, self-serve. And if you want more, they've got it. You can try one of their delicious cocktails from the bar or order some great German fusion food from their on-site eatery, Germanish. So what are you waiting for? Be seen, be social. District 7 Social.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky.
All right, everybody, welcome back for round 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, coming to you remotely from a strange location that makes me look yellow in downtown Lexington. But with me tonight is my good friend Stacey, coming to us remotely from her place over somewhere in Lexington. Stacey, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Mark. Even better that I found out that Elizabeth is from Cincinnati because my office is decked out in Cincinnati Reds gear. So.
I noticed Johnny Bench back there.
Got Johnny Bench, and I've got Pete Rose in the middle there.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and tell everybody who we have with
Sorry.
us, since we've already. No, that's okay. I always like to reintroduce the guests. So
we have Elizabeth McCall, the new master distiller from Woodford Reserve, with us today. And I don't know about
Yay.
you, Mark, but I'm really excited to have her here.
I am too. I'm disappointed. See, I'm not at home. I don't have my soundboard, so I usually have the applause, and the cheering and everything. And yeah, so I couldn't do that. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, that you get the remote version of the podcast today.
It's okay. It's okay. We're all like just getting through the crazy weather we've had lately.
Absolutely insane. So I picked my son up. He lives with his mom up out in Scott County, just on the border. And as I was headed up I-64, there were 3 trucks that had pulled off the interstate. And then I heard later that there were 3 trucks that were blown over right at the Fayette County, Scott County line. So I'm sure it was them. I mean, the winds were just absolutely insane. It took us over an hour to get home, what usually is a 20-minute drive. So it was rough. But, I know there's still a lot of people even now without electricity. So I'm fortunate. So, just the lack of internet is a stressor. Like you said, it's like a friend was saying, they didn't have electricity, and it was like living in the pioneer days. And I said, well, we've got electricity, but no internet. So it's like living back in the 1970s again. Because we got to talk to people. We got to read books. We got to, we got to do the things we never do anymore. So anyway, all right. So I want to thank all of our sponsors. We appreciate everything that they do for us, but we are excited to have Elizabeth McCall on the podcast with us. She is the brand new Master Distiller at Woodford Reserve. And Elizabeth, I usually like to tell people if I know our guest or if I've met our guest, I usually do that in the first round. I forgot to do that, but I did get the opportunity to meet you just a couple months ago at Watch Hill Proper. You had organized the Master Distillers Roundtable, which was really cool because it was you and Chris, Bill Samuels Jr., Caleb Kilburn, I believe, and Kaveh Zemanian.
Yep.
Was there
and
anybody?
Connor O'Driscoll.
And Connor O'Driscoll, that's right. Mm-hmm. So that was awesome, and that was for that was a kind of a fundraiser. It was a fundraiser for the O'Neill Foundation. I didn't want to go down the rabbit hole on that, but I think it's important. Can you talk about that a little bit? What that event was about and what O'Neill Foundation is?
So that was really exciting. Watch Hill proper gets tons of props and acknowledgement for helping bring that to life. I mean, a beautiful whiskey bar, Louisville, Kentucky. People should go there, check it out. And they support a lot of nonprofits. And we were looking for a space. My older brother is Brian O'Neill. He is the head basketball coach for Wagner High School basketball team, their varsity team. And the work that he does is amazing. I mean, he's a teacher at the Jefferson County Public School System and at Wagner. And just the stories of these kids on his team and what they have to go through. Getting a meal 3 times a day was always normal in my household. But for his players, some of his players on his team, that's not the norm. And so to pay for things like your spirit pack, which would be like your warm-ups and your practice jersey and shoes for the year, it's like just under $100 or $200. And some kids, they can't afford that to do that. And then they like to do like a trip, a kind of to bond them and to learn, and raising funds for that has always been a challenge. And so my brother was like, let's do a bourbon tasting. And I'm like, oh, that's the easiest thing I can do. That is right up my alley. And then we were talking to Watch Hill Proper about it. And they were like, well, what if we've been wanting to do one of these distillers roundtable? And I was like, yeah, because sure, people will come see me, but what if we got like a bunch of my distillery, distiller friends to come together and talk, and just how unique that would be. And they loved it because they had kind of been pitching that idea like around, tossing around their idea, in their head. And so we just turned it into this wonderful event. And I was so proud, just the people who showed up that, that I got to know better. Obviously like Connor O'Driscoll and I go way back. Chris Morris, obviously he's like family. And then Bill Samuels Jr., he's amazing. God, he's like the nicest human. And then Caleb Kilburn, he's kind of a newer player, and it was fun to get to know him and talk to him, and and Kaveh too. Kaveh's so cool. And so it was so wonderful to see all these people show up. They brought these awesome rare bottles that we auctioned off and raised a good amount of money for my brother. And I'm so excited to see sort of how that's going to impact, especially this year. They've used it for meals and been able to help kids pay for some of their typical things like shoes and their spirit packs. But hopefully they usually do a big summer trip, and this will really help cover the cost of that. And And so that's amazing work that my brother does. And I think like you're doing real things and I'm working in bourbon.
Oh,
But you're able
But,
to
you know-
bring the two together, and I think that that's
Yeah.
really awesome.
Exactly. Like that's the thing for me is I try to use this platform to support charities. So that's kind of the big thing for me. And now in my new role, I do need to kind of think what's really important to me and kind of focus stuff because there's so many great organizations around, not just the city of Louisville, but the entire state, and you want to support them all. So I got to focus a little bit, but it's
Yeah.
it's good to be able to help.
well, cool. Well, it was a great event, and I enjoyed it. And I wanted, to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about that because I could tell you're very proud of your brother and what he does, and I thought it was a great cause. So yeah, I was happy to be there and happy to share that with our listeners as well, just so they know. So this round, can you tell us what we have poured up to drink on this one?
Yes, so we are going to taste the Woodford Reserve Kentucky Straight Rye Whiskey. And so this came out in 2015. And it is a pre-prohibition style rye. So the rye grain recipe, when we introduced this, we had a lot of pushback because what the whiskey that was out on shelves at that time was most of it was like 95% or 100% rye. So when you introduce a 53% rye, so the grain recipe on this one is 53% rye, 33% corn, and 14% malted barley. Introducing that, people are like, is that really rye whiskey? Like what? And it is. I mean, the rules are at least 51% rye. But I say it's pre-prohibition style because it is a very historically accurate rye. It's how people were making rye whiskey before the advent of modern technologies with things such as artificial enzymes. There's nothing wrong with artificial enzymes. I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying that this is kind of a taste of history when it comes to rye whiskey because we've had to bump up the amount of malted barley in there, which gives complexity to the palate. You lessen the rye, so it's not just a big spice bomb that's hitting your palate. It still has spice. It's obviously spice forward, but then the corn, having 33% corn in there really gives you a creamy, sweet richness to the palate. So it's a great sipping whiskey. It's not one that you go, oh, I'm going to mix this in a cocktail. That's not your first thought. Your first thought is like, this is complexity in a glass and it's spice forward, but it's spice forward that you can really sip on and just enjoy.
Yeah, and this one comes in at 90.4, which is the standard proof point for Woodford products. But yeah, I mean, it's, talking about the double oaked as being like the gateway bourbon for some people. This would be a gateway rye for people because I used to just drink bourbon. I didn't drink rye whiskey,
Yeah.
but when I did taste it, it was like a 95.5, and it just like I felt like my face was going to melt off, maybe. So it wasn't an enjoyable experience. So finding ryes like this, that are that smoother, I call them the barely legal ryes because they hit that 50-ish percentile. But yeah, I mean, I think it's great. Stacey, what do you pick up in terms of the nose on this one?
Well, I'm going to echo kind of what you just said. This is an approachable rye for those that are kind of, turned off by, having your face melted off. I personally like to have my face melted off. But this has been one that I've been able to recommend to some of my friends who don't really like ryes. And I still love this one as a rye lover as well. But on the nose with this one, Elizabeth already mentioned, it's pretty complex. I get some like grassy lemon zest notes to it and some cherry again, but like ripe cherry, not a dark cherry like we talked about with the double oak. And also, obviously, you're going to get a little bit of that white pepper back there, some baking spice, some cinnamon, and I also get some like dark fruit of some sort. My nose is gravitating more towards plum instead of raisin on this one.
Nice, very nice. Yeah, to me, it came across almost like it has a little bit of mintiness to it, but a minty sweetness. So the corn, I think I'm picking up the sweetness off of that corn, but still a little bit of that spiciness off the rye, and it's just combining almost like a mint, like your mom's purse. When you go to church, and you'd be like, Mom, can I have a piece of gum?
That is the best description.
I love that.
Because I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, that's perfect.
Yeah, so that's what it kind of reminded me of, being a kid and getting in my mom's purse to get a piece of gum, and that minty smell of sweetness of gum, but also the mintiness. That's really the first aroma was like, oh my gosh, I'm back in my childhood sitting in a church pew.
Leather, but the leatheriness of that leather purse.
Yeah,
exactly right. Yeah,
that's
you get
that's a great point you just made there, Mark. Matt is going to be so impressed when he listens to this episode.
Man, I actually had something other than vanilla and caramel, and Matt absolutely missed it. Goodness gracious. So what else? Anything else on that one, Elizabeth, on the nose that
I think you both did great. I mean, Stacey, your descriptors were so good as well. I mean, because that's what's so interesting about this is that it's like baking spice. There's the mint. There's that grassiness that sometimes I think of dill coming through too, like a nice dill. But then there's tea. So that I get like, so where you were kind of going with that mint in your mom's purse, like the leatheriness of that. So that tea kind of herbal is there, but there's definitely lemon zest and then honey notes. I mean, I think of honey, and honey will definitely come through. Like once we taste it, it's just there. But
and very nice. So and this is in one of the standard expressions now with so you've got the straight bourbon, you've got the malt, right? There's malt and there's the wheat. Those are the like four. Okay, yeah. So this one came out in 2015. Is that what you said? Was that right? 2015. Yeah. So easy to find, easy gateway.
And at a great price point, too.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly right. Good point on that one. So let's jump back because I wanted to ask you a question. It was kind of fun. I was reading some articles. I do my research and I make my notes, Elizabeth. So I saw something. There was an article from years ago that said that the alcohol industry is in your blood. Can you talk about what that means to you and what that means today?
Interesting. Did I say that it was in my blood? Or
you said the alcohol industry is in my blood. I'm not sure if it was a relationship to your mom, maybe the fact that you'd had, your mom had worked in the industry. Perhaps that's what it was. But I really liked that quote. It just kind of jumped out at me. So.
Because I do think about, I mean, it's in my blood because, yes, my mom worked in it. My dad is the one who grew up always having his bourbon after work. But it is a part, and I think if you work in the industry, it's a part of your life. Like it's not, there's no cutoff between personal and work. I mean, it is ingrained in who I am and everything. So it is in my blood in the sense that like, I don't ever turn it off. And, and it made me think of, honestly, the first thing that came to mind was my daughter. I'm like, oh my God, my daughter, like between myself and my husband who loves to drink bourbon too, like she's going to, she has no choice in the matter. She will love it. And I'm very proud of that. And I hope that she does love it and I will never force it on her, but she'll know to grow up to learn to consume bourbon and whiskey and alcohol in a very responsible way. I will say that.
There we go. Yep.
Yeah. Right. Those things, but I do think, it is something that is a part of everything that I do in life. I mean, I can't go anywhere and not have it be part of what, and you're always like scoping out the back bar, like what bourbons do they have and what's there. I mean, it's a different lens that you look at the world, especially being here in Kentucky, where you're kind of ground zero of bourbon. Other places want to claim it, but no.
Well, and your daughter's going to be an unstoppable force if she does decide that she likes whiskey.
Oh God. Well, it's just the signs are strong. So.
Yeah, when she's teething, she's like, "Mommy, just can you?"
I know. Yeah, I don't want to say anything too publicly, but
No, I was going to ask. So what expression do you gravitate towards while she's teething?
All of them. I will say it's just dangerous to set down your glass of bourbon on the rocks, and there's no mixers in there. And if her favorite TV show at the time, it was Coco Melon, and I got to watch my glass.
Makes it a much more enjoyable experience for mom and all those involved.
Yeah. So
I was a proud mom, very proud mom. So,
very nice. Yeah. So let's jump back and talk a little bit about your career. You started 2009 with Brown Forman, and then you were actually, I think you had the official designation as Master Taster. Was that right? Okay. Mm-hmm. And you've also served more recently as the assistant master distiller at Woodford. Can you talk about both of those roles and really what that means and what you were doing in each of those positions?
Yeah, those are interesting because we don't have as an industry, we don't have standards for what makes a master distiller, or master taster is something that Chris Morris made up as a Brown Forman standard or term. And so it is. So for me, when I learned to be a master taster, and Chris Morris has curriculum, so I will need to say that he has written curriculum for what qualifies you to be a master taster, what qualifies you to be assistant master distiller or master distiller in training sort of thing, and then master distiller. So I've had to go through a Chris Morris development. And for those of you that know Chris Morris, that is quite rigorous. And plus just no pressure. He's only like a major legend. But so when it comes to the master taster stuff, because I came from sensory, I had a huge kind of already a great base to draw off of for that. And so it was all about, you have to participate in all of our expert panels. So understanding whiskey at new make while it's maturing, how does it mature? What are the flavor differences along that journey? And then also being able to do just sorting panels and different types of tasting panels. So it was really heavily focused on that expert evaluation of whiskey. And then I had to learn the PR, storytelling, marketing side, which is an art. There's an art to it because Woodford is it's not just a marketing story. So it's not like a fanciful story that I just have to like memorize and get. It is the story. It is what it is. It's how we make our whiskey, and there's not a lot else to it. And then when it comes to so that was kind of master taster work. Then when I became assistant master distiller, I got to get more involved in the innovation and really having an impact on the future masters collections and then the distillery series. And so he kind of let me lead that in a way. And so I've been doing a lot. It's been great, the sort of progression, because that was I get to work alongside Chris and learn all these things. And he's still around as now I've assumed the role of master distiller. It's like he's still there helping me, because then part of my development as assistant master distiller is learning the bigger business side, because there's more to a brand like Woodford Reserve than just the distillation side of it. That piece has sort of been ironed out. When we have the best people in the industry working out at Woodford Reserve, so I've got my distillery manager is awesome. Our operators there are amazing. Everybody working in processing. Like I have a connection because I worked out there, so I know everybody really well. And so you can lean on them and trust them. And then innovation is where when you're innovating, you have to develop those relationships. So when you're like, we want to do something really weird and challenging, and it's going to be a pain in your ass. So please don't be mad at me. But you develop those relationships so that, and you want to know what you're asking people when you're making these asks to do the weird stuff for innovation. But then also learning the business. So the sales and marketing piece of it, and how do you steer a major brand like this and keep it on track. And so that's been a huge learning. And that's bigger. And then now in my role as master distiller, I feel like I've taken a more elevated approach. And now I'm really, and for me personally in this, I think we're growing a lot. Woodford's on a major trajectory. And how do we support that growth and be sustainable for the next 5-10 years? So I'm really trying to look at it long-term and plan things out, from grains and getting into the sustainability space with that. And then also just production wise, are we able to produce what we need to meet the demands of the future? So it's been a fun progression.
That's very cool. It's really cool to talk with somebody that started, in a lab, just with a psychology degree, and is now master distiller at one of the biggest selling bourbons in the world. That's got to be. I can't imagine what the feeling is. I just can't. Is there any way to quantify that verbally?
No, I haven't found it yet. Because sometimes, you know, what always comes to mind is when I'm in this role, like, is Forrest Gump. And, you know, and Jenny's asking Forrest, like, well, you know, like, oh my gosh, look at you. And he's like, well, I just did what you told me to do. Like, you're talking to Jenny. And I feel that way about my job. I'm just showing up to work and I'm doing what I love and what I'm passionate about. And there was no intention of getting to this title of Master Distiller. It was just show up to work, be inquisitive, and help out where you can. And I'm loud in a way. And I feel like I was talking to one of my newer he's now my new boss. I still have my old boss, but I still have a new boss, and he's over a lot of production. And I was like, well, I want to do this and this and this, and I have all these ideas. And I was like, and if I'm getting out of my lane, just tell me, and you can like redirect me. I'm not going to be mad, but this is how I think. I'm just a big thinker and planner, and have a lot of ideas. But I always like to be collaborative. I'm a very collaborative person, so it's like I want to pull in all the right people and get us all talking. So everybody feels like they're a part of this whole project and dream. So it's been fun. I love it. I couldn't be happier with where I am.
Well, that's great. Congratulations on that again. Stacey, let's jump back because we're into round 2, but we probably should talk about the palate.
We probably should. We probably
on
should.
this, right. Yeah. So what do you think, Miss Note Taker? What do you got over there?
So the note taker here, coming from another note taker in another form and fashion, though, getting some of that pepperiness on the palate leaves a nice little tingle, which I love, absolutely love. Getting some cinnamon and baking spice. This one is coming through as like almost like a vanilla mint ice cream to me, because I get a little bit of that like creaminess there, a little hint of the mint from Mama's Purse in church. But I don't know, the mouthfeel on this is really nice. I really enjoy this.
Yeah, it's a really nice combination of mintiness that I get, the spiciness, you know, but that mintiness comes through still on the palate. But like you said, Elizabeth, that corn, the high profile, 33%, was that right? 30. Yeah. So you get that corn sweetness and that kind of that creamy mouthfeel from that. It's a really nice combination. And the palate, I mean, the finish, it goes on. It just lingers. You get all those little notes and I love it because it kind of fluctuates, because it's spicy. And then all of a sudden you kind of get that sweetness that kind of creeps back up a little bit. And then that mint kind of sneaks in again. And then it turns a little spicy. So I like that interplay of all those different flavors and those aromas that continue on the palate.
It's just complex.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's so good, neat, but this would be killer in a cocktail as well.
Well, it's my favorite Manhattan. Love it.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to have to definitely try that.
Yeah.
My next
I was going to say.
Manhattan.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break. We'll get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more with Elizabeth McCall, the new Master Distiller at Woodford Reserve, in just a minute.
Three Chords line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The Three Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they called Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.threechordbourbon.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final round of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, coming to you live from somewhere remote studio in downtown Lexington with a beautiful orange yellow light over top of my head. And I'm here with my good friend, Stacey, who is filling in for normal co-host Matt. Actually, this may be just a permanent replacement.
Oh, my God, don't say that.
I think it's working really well, Stacey, so Matt just may have to get his walk-in papers.
No. Matt, if you're listening, that's not true.
Are you kidding? Matt doesn't even listen to the podcast. Whatever.
Well, Matt's family, if anybody that knows Matt is listening.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
Matt's
not
mom
true.
and dad will be listening. We're just kidding. We're not going to replace Matt. So, Stacey,
No.
how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, but I'm going to be even better once we get to this third and final round, because I'm so stoked about what we have poured up for this round.
Yes, I am too. But you know what? I've got a great idea. Why don't we let our guest. Well, tell everybody who we have with us if they're just tuning in on the third round.
If you're just tuning in on the third round, you need to rewind and go back to the first two rounds. But we have Miss Elizabeth McCall, the new Master Distiller from Woodford Reserve, with us this afternoon. And Elizabeth, we'll let you go ahead and tell us what we have poured up for this third and final round.
All right. Well, so I'm going to take it. So this is a French word, and I'm going to say it in a very Kentucky way. So this is the Woodford Reserve Baccarat, and it is our luxury expression of Woodford Reserve. It is housed in a Baccarat crystal decanter bottle, usually running retail around $2,500. And it's very limited. And what makes the liquid so special is that we've taken our Woodford Reserve Distiller Select Bourbon and then finished it in XO cognac barrels. So these are cognac barrels that have held 10 plus years of cognac. We received them wet and we filled them in 2016. So this expression you're tasting is a 2-year finish of the cognac finish. So it has all those, obviously the base is Woodford Reserve bourbon, but what we've done and our finishing philosophy is always we finish Woodford Reserve in barrels that contain character that already exists in Woodford, and we can just like make it blossom and explode. So we actually call out cognac as a flavor attribute in Woodford bourbon. And then this just kind of explodes that. But what is cognac? Cognac is dried dark fruits and lots of baking spice. There's so much. This is elevating all those dried dark fruit notes. So your dried cranberry, the prune, oh my gosh, like dried strawberries, even raisin notes. And there's lots of baking spice. Like I love how kind of spicy it is. It's just a nice kind of little compliment to Woodford.
Yeah, I really can't top that. Stacey, I'm not even going to try. Do you have anything to add to those?
I'm not going to top it, but I want to add, I get a slight nuttiness to it. It almost, and I hate to use this, but it's like a fruit cake because you're getting all those like dark fruit notes, but there's also a slight nuttiness. You're getting the baking spice that comes in with that cake, but there's also like a little bit of funk to it.
Yep. Well, I was kind of, all of a sudden I'm sitting here thinking of praline.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Yeah.
That nutty sweetness of a praline.
Yep.
So it's like,
and I'm getting like a hint of like a, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Stacey. You're on a roll. Sorry.
There's like a slight floral note coming across to me, and I can't put my finger on what exactly it is, but I'm getting a little hint of floral.
Because, I mean, cognac has those floral notes too, and this a little bit of that oxidized sort of barrel character that you get in a fortified wine, which can come across florally.
Yeah. So it's like a piece of fruitcake from your mom's purse, right?
I don't know how heavy your mom's purse was, but it sounds like she was packing at all times.
She carried a lot of shit in there. I'm just saying, no doubt about it. Goodness.
All moms did, though. I mean, my mom's too. And lots of tissues. Lots of tissues.
Always. The tissues always smelled like mint gum.
I was going to make that joke in our last round because my mom's purse during church was always full of tissues and mints. So nice Kleenex nose to that.
Yep.
So here's one thing I wanted to add real quick, Elizabeth, before we jump into the question, because I know Stacey has a question she is just dying to ask you. But before she does that, I'm going to say when I was doing some research and stuff for the last show with Chris, I was looking at the profiles online, and I saw your profile, and I saw the letters CSS. And I was like, what's a CSS? I had no idea what CSS was. So I went down the whole rabbit hole, and I signed up. And I got the books, and I've been studying for that. But in the meantime, I also signed up for the Council of Whiskey Masters has this whole new Master of Bourbon thing that they're doing, this whole certification program. So I jumped into that, and I've been working on that. So I've taken the coursework and done everything for the CSS. I just haven't taken the exam yet. But it's an eye-opening experience. I mean, it's really, because, for me, it's been bourbon and then bourbon and rye. And now it's like, oh my God, we're talking about cognac. And I'm like, I had no idea. I didn't know anything about cognac, Armagnac, nothing. And now I'm like, I feel like I'm in a Disney movie. It's like, it's a whole new world, there's.
But it's true. I mean, and that chapter, the brandy chapter for CSS is so thick, and there's so much to it. And you're like, oh my God. And I'm sorry that you have to go through that test. That test is the worst. When I got done, I was like, I passed. I don't know what my score was, but I passed it. It's one of those tests where it just wants to confuse you. It's like, which one's the most right? And you're like,
Right.
I hate you so much right now. I'm a terrible test taker. So, but I did pass it. So I get to put CSS after my name, and I do.
Well, that's the inspiration. So hopefully by the end of this year, I have to take it by October, because I went ahead, I did all the coursework and study, and then I was like, wait, I'm going to do this Master Bourbon program. So I've kind of put it on a hiatus for a few months, but I will return to that. But I thank you for that, because I had no idea what it was, but it's really been a fun experience to find, just even vodka. People badmouth vodka, but it just opened a whole new world. Like I said, I mean, experiences of things of alcohol and spirits that I've never had before. And I'm starting to look for those things on the shelves now and say, hey, I should probably just at least try that, right?
Yeah, just gives you a whole new perspective and appreciation for everything.
Yep.
So I love it.
Definitely.
Good for you.
All right.
Yeah, we're
Stacey.
proud of Mark, even though we give him crap. We're really proud of him.
Thank you, Stacey. I appreciate it. Hey, didn't you have a wonderful question that you wanted to ask?
I did have a question. I did. So, Elizabeth, we've kind of hinted at how Chris Morris is like family to you, but seeing as it is Women's History Month, were there any females in the industry that really stood out to you, or was like a mentor to you, or anyone that you kind of looked up to whenever you were taking on this role?
I would have to say that kind of internally at Brown Forman, I was surrounded by women in my group. So the entire sensory team was all women. And it still pretty much is. So, but I just looked at, I guess, there weren't many other women to look up to. I don't know if other than seeing we had a woman when I was first starting at Brown Forman, we had Jill Jones, she was our executive production leader. And so we had women in these executive leadership roles that really inspired me to see that women can be in these leadership positions. But that was kind of it, because there weren't many women that were in these roles that you could look to and go, oh, okay, well, she's the master distiller there. I want to do that. And I never really thought about it until somebody was asking me the other day, and sort of like right now, where it's well, I never had somebody as an example, and it never dawned on me that it was weird that I was pursuing this. When Chris Morris was asking, I'll never forget, we were driving to lunch together, and it was when I was training to be master taster, or right after I was named master taster. And he basically told me how, if you're going to go down this path, this is what you do at Brown Forman. You will be assistant master distiller and then master distiller. You don't go from this role and then decide, okay, well, I'm done being master distiller. Now I want to go be VP of sales or the production distillery manager. That's not really what you do. You're kind of putting yourself, pigeonholing yourself into this role. And that was more of it. And I was like, okay, I want to do that. And it wasn't weird that I wanted to be, to say the words, I want to be master distiller one day. And I don't know, but it should have been more weird than it was, I guess. But for whatever reason, I think because I was in a culture of women in leadership roles, and it wasn't weird at all.
Well, and something that I kind of wanted to touch back on what you mentioned in the last round too was, it probably didn't feel weird to you because you said you just showed up, you worked, and you were passionate about what you're doing. And I think that speaks volumes about where you are today, and that's why you are where you are today. So that's something to be proud of. And coming from another female who is still relatively new to bourbon, I mean, I've been drinking it for years, but just over the last 3 to 4 years, learning a lot more about it and taking it more seriously. It's really awesome to see people like yourself who started from an entry-level position and have worked your way up. It's really inspiring. And I just really appreciate people like you that are putting themselves out there and just passionate about what they do, and you're not, looking for a handout or anything like that. Not saying that any woman in the industry is, but
No.
you've busted your butt to get to where you are, and I think that that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's me and then all the other women that I get to work with in this industry who are faces of brands and working in the production facilities. Like, we are all doing that. I don't consider myself really a trailblazer. I consider myself a trail smoother, because I think there were women who came much earlier on. I mean, Susan Riegler is somebody I think of, like, I was with her she came to one of my tasting events. I was like, you're a trailblazer. Like, you blasted through the thick forest in order for me to even be able to be where I am today. And now I'm just kind of cleaning it up. And then I'm going to make it real smooth for the next generation of young women to come through.
I think
that's how my brain
that's a
thinks of
great
it.
way of putting it, though. It really is. It really is.
Yeah, I agree. And I got the chance to meet Susan last week at the Bourbon Classic
Of course
as part
you
of the
did.
media.
She's awesome. I mean,
Yeah,
she's been around and doing this for a long time, and she's cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. And it's funny because I have a daughter who's going to be 25 soon, and she has her master's degree in behavioral analysis. So she is a behavior analyst, but she hates her job. But it's just funny because I think there are opportunities for young women out there who may not think of bourbon as a career or bourbon as an option for them, or the industry as a whole. So it's just really cool, and I really appreciate that, the fact that you were able to do that pivot and say, yeah, I've got a master's in psychology, but you know what? I'm gonna use that in a little bit of a way that maybe other people haven't really identified as a possibility, and here you are.
Yeah, it's a good way. Now we just need to change. I was telling Stacey earlier, I was like, we need to change it now that when they show women on television and they're having a drink, that they aren't always just pouring up the wine. Let's have them pouring up their whiskey. Come on.
Oh yeah.
That's what I do.
Yep.
I go home.
No,
so.
I agree with that. And that's like Peggy Stevens talks about that. How many women that she talks to that drink their bourbon and love barrel proof, neat bourbon.
Yep.
It's just kind of crazy, which I love it. So I think it's great. So.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about the
one other
palate
question.
and the finish. Oh, sorry, Stacey.
Sorry, I had one other question before we get into the palate and the finish, if I can. Or should we go to the palate and finish, and then I can ask my last question?
No, ask your question. I'm sorry. There's a little bit of a delay, so it's like I start jumping in and then you're jumping in. So sorry about that, Stacey.
Technology.
Please go
It's
ahead.
okay.
The floor is all yours.
Thanks. So a question that I had, and that's kind of piggybacking off of what Mark had just mentioned about his daughter, not really liking her job. And we talked about how, the alcohol industry wasn't your forefront of your mind whenever you were, going to college. So what advice would you give to a young female who is wanting to get into the alcohol industry, more so in like the bourbon whiskey world?
Mm-hmm. I think there's so many different areas to work in. So where does somebody want to work that's in the beverage alcohol industry? So I think that's kind of an important kind of piece to it, to deciding which area, because there's hospitality, there's production, there's marketing, sales, all that. And then try to take there are courses now that you can, and like Mark, like you're taking some of those certification type classes. But I think of that, I just take a chance, like look at what the descriptions are out there, and you don't necessarily have to be 100% qualified, but if you have some of the qualifications, to try them out, and do that, and then just say yes to opportunities, because it's kind of a weird, and I think I've said this before, I think it's a passion driven kind of industry. So if you're passionate and interested, you can learn, and a lot of it is heritage and learning kind of on the job and at each facility. So I definitely think that there is just room for everybody in this industry, and I think if you're curious enough, you'll figure it out. You'll get there. But take entry level positions, because that's where you get the most knowledge too.
I love that.
Yeah, So let's jump over to the palate and finish, Stacey. What are you picking up on that?
So the palate on this is freaking delicious. How else do I say it? It's dark fruit. It's dessert in a glass, which my favorite dessert, I don't know if we've talked about this or not, is creme brulee. This is creme brulee all the way on the palate for me. Also has a nice bit of spice still to it. And it has a little bit of it reminds me of like a rum-ish funk on it, which I don't hate. I like it a lot, actually.
I would say, yeah, go ahead, Elizabeth. Sorry.
I was gonna say I agree with that. I mean, it has that rum funk is cool, and like that kind of getting into that oxidized note, and that just kind of those brandy cognac characteristics that kind of, it's all that fruit that's been distilled down, and so yumminess going on.
Yeah, that's delicious. And I'm sitting here thinking, trying to rationalize to myself, can I really afford to spend that much on a bottle of whiskey? Because it's delicious. And I've wondered, because I've seen it at a store, and I've wondered, all right, so what makes this so special? I mean, obviously it's in a beautiful bottle. I mean, it's gorgeous. But then I'm like, man, that's really nice. that's a delicious expression.
Well, and what's interesting is we started with the liquid first, and then Baccarat Crystal got involved. So it wasn't like we intentionally created something to work with Baccarat. We made this liquid, and Baccarat wanted to work with us. They reached out to us, and so having them as a partner has really elevated this from a price standpoint, to get it into that, because you can't deny that Baccarat Crystal is so amazing, and it's such a special thing. Hand blown, every bottle is hand blown. So there's a lot of love and energy that goes into just the making the crystal for it. So, but it was liquid first. We started with wanting beautiful liquid, and then the Baccarat came next. So I think that speaks to the liquid.
Well, very nice. I'm really enjoying it. First time I've had it, so.
Yeah, same here, and it was amazing.
Yeah, and I get a little bit of like a leather off the end of it, just like a little hint, maybe a little tobacco leather.
Yeah.
So very nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. So we're almost at the end of round 3, but before we do that and wrap it up, let's talk about the future. What's it look like? I mean, you've reached Master Distiller level, and Chris says you're pigeonholed in now. You can't do anything else. You're stuck.
Stuck here. I know. It's funny. You know what I've noticed a lot is that being a part of a brand like Woodford Reserve, we're going to see people on the brand team and production facilities come and go. And I think of all the different people Chris has had involved with the brand, and what is so important about Chris's role and now my role is being that consistent, constant, like, keeper of the brand, and making sure that the integrity of this brand is maintained. So that's number one most important role. As we see different brand managers come, they'll all have different ideas of things we should do. But Chris has taught me kind of what grounds this brand and what has grown it to where it is over the past 26 plus years, and where we will continue to see that growth. And so it's maintaining the true heart and soul and priorities of this brand. We're not just going to do everything like, oh, this is cool. No, like what's at the heart and soul of it. So that's going to be a big thing. And then planning for supporting that growth. And so that's a big part of this role too. So, yeah, but it's kind of weird. I will be here. It's like, I think, well, when I'm getting ready to retire, when I'm going to turn 65, like I will still be working on Woodford. Oh, the stories I will have at that time.
Oh my gosh. How awesome though, just the future is wide open for you, Elizabeth, and I'm so excited for you and for Woodford. It's just crazy because when I think of Woodford Reserve, it just, and I said this to Chris before, that it's almost like it's been around for 150 years. I mean, it is just part of Kentucky, and it is an integral part of what bourbon is to me. And to think that it's only really been here since 1996, it doesn't make sense.
It's just a baby. It's still a baby.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful.
It is. Well, we're excited to see what you're going to do with it, Elizabeth. No pressure, but I can't wait.
Basically, don't screw it up is the biggest thing.
I think you'll be just fine.
Yes, Definitely. Well, we've had a great time. We really appreciate it. We are at the end of round 3. So any final thoughts before we wrap it up and get out of here, Elizabeth?
Nothing other than just thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been a real pleasure, and just encourage everybody to go out and have a bottle of Woodford Reserve on your back bar, because your guests will be glad you do, and you will too.
Absolutely.
Well said. Stacey, what about you before we wrap it up?
Well, I wanted to say, Elizabeth, it was awesome talking with you and seeing you virtually. I hope to meet you in person soon. But this was a very awesome experience for coming from a female who is a big whiskey enthusiast. So thanks so much for spending time and talking with us today.
Of course. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, and definitely I'll kind of reiterate that. Not that I'm a female.
You're not a female, but that's okay.
But still, it was a pleasure to have you on the show, and an honor as well. And I think we may hopefully be the first podcast to have you on as the new Master Distiller.
Yeah, I think you are.
All right, yeah. There we go. So, yes.
Gold star. Put that on the board.
There you go. So, no, that's awesome. But just really, really excited for you. And obviously the passion that you have shows in everything that you do, Elizabeth. And you can just tell that this is, like you said in the article from 2016, I mean, that it's in your blood. I mean, it is. And you can tell that the way you talk about it, the way that you handle yourself around it. It's really, really nice to see that. And I'm excited to see what you do with Woodford over the next 30 plus odd years.
Remind me how long I have until retirement.
No pressure.
No pressure at all there, Elizabeth. So, but again, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate all of our listeners. Thank you all for everything you do. And thank you for tuning in, whatever time of day it is and wherever you are. We appreciate you taking the time to listen in and enjoy the show, hopefully. We also want to thank all our sponsors. We appreciate everything that they do for us as well. If you want to reach out to us, feel free to do so. You can email us at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. We'd love to hear from you guys. And with that said, I'm going to wrap it up and send us some with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the Bourbon Life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the Bourbon Life.